So I'm a 25-year-old Brit living here in Australia, and during my time here, there is definitely a list of things which I wish I had done differently when moving from the UK to Australia. I don't have any massive regrets because I'm very glad of everything that's happened the way it has. However, if I were to do my whole Australia journey again, these are some things which I definitely would do differently, some big mistakes that I made, and also some things that I honestly do regret. So we're going to go into that in today's video. Before we get into it, make sure you give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, let's get into it. So the first thing that I would have done differently was I would have traveled first. Now, when I moved to Australia, I spent 5 months living in Sydney. I literally did not plan to travel at all during my time in Australia. Obviously, I thought later down the line I would. But honestly, all I pictured was living in Sydney for the whole time. That's literally all I pictured. And that is exactly what I did. I spent 5 months in Sydney. And whilst I did like Sydney, having travelled a lot of Australia now, I've realised that there is actually a lot of places that I do like, a lot more than Sydney. And I almost not wasted that time in Sydney, but I wish I travelled from the very start, because one thing I've learned when you travel Australia is how different everywhere is in the country. And I would have used that money that I spent for like 2 months in Sydney before we started working. We could have travelled for literally the same amount of money. So I would have definitely travelled up the East Coast, probably seen my favourite places, have a bit of fun, do you know what I mean? We did have fun in Sydney, of course, but paying hostels and stuff, like our money was just going down. We could have easily travelled on that money, but we chose to stay in the most expensive place for the first 5 months. We did work there as well, but yeah, I think I liked Sydney, but it wasn't my favourite place in Australia. And as I said, it's not wasted time. I feel like it would have been much better to travel first of all, because that's one thing I say to anyone that moves to Australia. Travel first, because you don't know where your favourite place is going to be. You don't want to spend ages somewhere that you don't even like that much. Point number 2 is I would have completely avoided the winter down south. Now, when I moved to Australia again, I actually hadn't done that much research into the cities, into the climates as well. I thought Australian winter was going to be pretty warm, to be honest. Not boiling, obviously, but I was very shocked at how cold it got, which we'll come on to later in the video. But I spent the whole winter in Sydney pretty much, and it definitely wasn't the best. It was cold, it was dark, it was wet. And because of that, we didn't really get to live that Sydney beach sun lifestyle right from the start. Do you know what I mean? We pretty much just went out drinking loads in the pubs, because it was winter and there wasn't actually much else to do. So going back to the first point about traveling first, I would have done that, and I would have gone up north somewhere, maybe like Cairns, Darwin, like Queensland in general, where it's a lot warmer. I would have gone somewhere like that, because we would have been able to live that Australian lifestyle on the beach in the sun. I don't really know why we spent the whole winter in Sydney. And then when I left Sydney at the end of winter, went up to Queensland, I was like, this weather is amazing. So I would have done that earlier, avoided the winter in Sydney. For anyone looking to visit Sydney, I would not go in the winter, because look, I feel like cities like Sydney and Perth in particular, their whole vibe and everything there is to do is outdoor based. So in the winter, it's not the best place to be. I would have gone up north where the weather is nice and warm. Point number 3 is I would have bought clothing for all different types of weather. Now, I did not expect Australian winter to be anywhere near as cold as it was. I literally bought shorts, t-shirt, and a few hoodies. My best mate came with a big puffer jacket, and I was like, what are you doing? Why are you bringing that? And honestly, he was right to bring that, because it was so much colder than I expected in Sydney, especially in the house. Like, there's no central heating, and also the houses are not made for the cold at all. So I was freezing in that house. I actually had to get a heater. But for just going out and about, I would have definitely brought more warm weather clothes. Pretty much all the early clothes that I bought in Australia were like hoodies, big hoodies and stuff, because I was cold. I think a lot of backpackers make that mistake when they move to Australia, because Australia is known for being hot, right? So when the winter is freezing, it shocked a lot of people. Point number 4 is I would not have listened to other people's opinions at all. I'm someone that generally doesn't listen to too many people's opinions. I definitely like to make my mind up on a place for myself. That's how I generally travel and stuff, because everyone's experience is different. But honestly, After traveling a lot of Australia, I cannot believe how many people's opinions I disagree with. Some people's worst places in Australia have ended up being some of my favorite, and some people's favorite places in Australia end up being some of my worst. Do you know what I mean? And whilst it didn't necessarily stop me from going to certain places, I feel like I did make my early travel plans around places that people hyped about, when in reality, looking back, a lot of my favorite places have been the places that aren't hyped about so much. And also the amount of backpackers that I've met that will give you their opinion on a place or tell you about the jobs and stuff there, but they've never even been. What is that all about? We had that a few months ago. Someone was like, oh, by the way, there's no jobs in Cairns. And I was like, oh, really? How do you know? And they were like, oh, my friend said. What, have you been? Do you know what I mean? Looking back, I would not listen to the opinions of any backpackers, to be honest. You're best off speaking to the local Aussies, because they know what they're talking about. Point number 5 is I would have not gone out anywhere near as much as I did. Now, I definitely don't regret going out at the start, because it was exciting, right? Me and my best mate had moved from the UK. We were 21, moved to this new city. Like, of course, we wanted to go out and drink and party. Like, I don't regret doing that, but I maybe would have done it a little bit less, to be honest, because just from going out half the amount of times, we could have saved so much more money, and that would have allowed us to travel the country way more. Especially in them first few weeks, we spent a lot of money eating out every day, drinking 2-3 times a week, paying for a hostel. Like, we could have traveled with all that money that we spent, but particularly the alcohol, which is very expensive in Australia. We spent a lot of money drinking and partying in them first few weeks, which part of me doesn't regret because it's good memories. But if I went back and did my whole time again, I definitely wouldn't have gone out so much, because there is no such thing as a cheap night out in Australia. I would have saved most of that money for traveling. Point number 6 is a bit different to the travel one, and that is that I would have sorted a house before moving. Now, if we decided that we definitely did want to settle in Sydney to start with, which we did, I would have looked at getting a house set up straight away, because traveling to lots of different places in Australia, particularly the last 2 places we've been, which is Cairns and Perth, we have actually got a house organised before we even got there, which has saved us so much time looking for houses when we get there. But most importantly, it has saved us so much money not looking for a house whilst paying for a hostel. Do you know what I mean? I think we must have spent at least 3 weeks living in hostels in Sydney, maybe even a month in hostels in Sydney. And for you guys in Australia, you'll know that hostels are not cheap, especially in Sydney. So if we would have got a house set up before we even got there, which is definitely possible, I honestly think we would have paid like half the amount of money for accommodation, because hostels are so expensive. Weekly rent, it's like $200, maybe $200-300 max. So I would have definitely tried to get a house set up before we got there. And the last point, another housing point, and that is a regret that I have actually in a couple of places in Australia, and that is I would not have bothered looking for our own house at all. We made this mistake on a couple of occasions. In Sydney when we arrived in Australia, but also the first time we lived in Perth, we spent multiple weeks, again, whilst paying for a hostel, trying to look for our own house. But for you guys who know the housing markets in Australia, it's not easy to get your own house, especially if you're a backpacker just looking to do a couple of months. The majority of rentals, when you're renting your own place, 1, they like you to have a job set up already, which we didn't have, and 2, they like you to do at least 12 months, which is a nightmare. So on them 2 occasions where we've been looking for our own place, again, we could have saved a lot of time and a lot of money by just simply going for a house share straight away. And now, after a few years in Australia, we've definitely learned that going for a house share is by far the best option, because you can get a house share very, very easily and very quickly. Yeah, wasting our time looking for our own place. I don't regret it now necessarily, but I definitely wouldn't do it again. So there are some things which I would do differently if I had my time in Australia again. Like I said, I don't regret anything really, because I'm very glad everything that's happened, because it's got me to the point I got to now. Do you know what I mean? For example, if I went traveling straight away, I wouldn't have met my girlfriend when I did, because we pretty much met at a very specific point where we were both traveling. So I don't regret it. And for you guys who are looking to move to Australia, it's a heads up for you guys. I have actually released a full moving to Australia guide if you're looking to move to Australia. It basically covers every mistake that I've ever made, so you don't make the exact same mistakes that I do. That's available at the top of the description. Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments on this one, and I'll see you in the next video.